gonna get you, Barbara.
Ever played Skin the Cat?
Someone's in the back seat! Tell me where you are, John!
Wolfman's got Nards!
Hi guys, my name's Barry and welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be giving you my top 10 Wes Craven movies. Now Wes Craven has given us more than 10 movies, but I thought I would just dwindle it down to 10 because he has given us maybe 12 to 13 good to great movies, so I thought a top 10 would be the perfect number. As always guys, this list is not official. This list is just my opinion. There might be movies on this list that you think shouldn't be there, and there might be movies that are missing from Wes Craven's archives that should be on the top 10 in your opinion, but that's the beauty of this video guys. This is just an opinionated video, so this is my top 10 Wes Craven movies. Squeezing in at number 10 is The Last House on the Left, the 1972 original. Now this one, I did a review for this one a few years ago and my opinions haven't changed much. It's not the best film ever made, it's just a good movie, but I think what makes it good is the nostalgia behind it and the shock factor for this film, because back in the day it was banned in a lot of countries, and I think that's what made people want to see it, because it was a banned movie. Any movie back in the 90s or the noughties, for me anyway, in the UK, there was the video nasties list, and I think every film on that list everyone wanted to see, just to see why the movie was banned. And then when you watch The Last House on the Left, yes, we can see why the movie was banned, but that's the only thing it's got going for it, to be honest, the fact that the movie was banned. Because when you watch the film today, it's very dated. There's not much to it. The acting in it was terrible. Even the directing in the film wasn't great by Wes Craven. I know it was his first, or one of his first movies. I think it was his first feature film. So he had a lot to learn at the time, but I think with a filmmaker coming into it in the early stages of his life, I think it was a good beginning to him, because it gave him a name in horror. Wes Craven's The Last House on the Left. And at number 9 is Cursed. This movie, it probably had a cursed production, because like a lot of Wes Craven films, they go into production hell, and this is one of them, probably the one that went into production hell for the longest, because I think it was supposed to come out early 2004, it got delayed to 2004 still, at the end of 2004, and then the beginning of 2005 when it eventually came out, but it was heavily cut, heavily CGI'd as well. We still haven't got the Wes Craven cut. I'm hoping that we get it eventually, with Skeet Ulrich for example, with the non-CGI werewolf. No idea if that will happen, but this is one of the films on Wes Craven's list that a lot of people, not a lot of people, but some people don't like. But I think as the years go by, the movie gets a bit of a charm to it. I always liked the film, I liked it since it first came out, but I think over the years, I think the movie's dated better than a lot of films that came out back in 2004, 2005. Great cast as well. Some of the characters or some of the actors in this film are still acting today in big roles, so I think that's something that Wes Craven done really well. He chose up and coming actors that he knew were going to be big in Hollywood in 10-15 years time, and Cursed is no exception. And at number 8 is The Hills Have Eyes from 1977. Just like The Last House on the Left, I don't think this movie has lived up to what it was supposed to be back in the day. I'm not sure if this movie was banned in the UK, it might have been banned at some point, but when you watch it today, you're like, okay, it's a good movie. I think it's a lot better than The Last House on the Left, because unlike The Last House on the Left, The Hills Have Eyes has a good story behind it, and I love how Wes Craven directed this film in the middle of nowhere, in the desert. People are stranded, there's people living in the hills. It was a film that I always wanted to see when I was a kid, and I did see it as a kid, but as I watched it as an adult, I liked it as a teenager, and then when I watched it as a grown adult, I thought it's okay. Honestly guys, I prefer the remake from 2006 directed by Alexander Aja. I think his style of film suited a story like The Hills Have Eyes more than what Wes Craven did with The Hills Have Eyes, but I still really liked The Hills Have Eyes. It's just not one of Wes Craven's movies that I'll always go out to see, but it's still a good film. And at number 7 is The People Under the Stairs. I think this is the one movie on the list that's the most nostalgic to me. Now I know that everyone has their own era of nostalgia, but I think the 90s, when it comes to collecting VHSs and DVDs and going to the video store, I think the 90s is the big era for me, when I was introducing myself to horror movies, because I would watch horror films with my parents, but then there was some horror films that I wanted to watch myself because they weren't interested in them, and The People Under the Stairs was one of them. There was something about going to the video store and going and seeing a ghostly figure in the sky above a house. For example, Fright Night, The Return of the Living Dead Part 2, The People Under the Stairs. That type of poster drew me in big time. Whether the movie was good or not, I didn't care. I just wanted to rent it. So The People Under the Stairs was one of those movies. But even with the artwork aside, the film is still good. It's a really good film. I love the suburban type horror that we're getting here. It's almost like The Burbs from a few years earlier, only it's got a bit more horror to it. I love the fact that they've got these people under the stairs. The parents are torturing their kids. I don't love that fact, but I love the fact that that's the story behind it. So yeah, it's a bit of a survival movie, and it's got a little kid in it that I was about his age when I watched the film, so I could get behind that character and become him as I'm going through the journey of the movie. And at number 6 is Scream 4. This is a film that's maybe went down on the list because I really enjoyed this film when it first came out. I think it's because it was the first Scream movie that I saw at the cinema. Unfortunately, I was too young to see the first 3 Scream movies at the cinema, so Scream 4 was the first one I got the opportunity to see at the cinema. And I remember it being glorious. It was fantastic watching this film in the cinema because it just took me back to all the Scream films of the time before. But Wes Craven, he hadn't really lost it because they'd done a lot better than he did with Scream 3. So I think he made up for the mistakes that he made in Scream 3. He took it back to Woodsboro. He introduced teenagers again. So he'd done the right thing in bringing Ghostface back in Woodsboro with the teenagers. But I think one of the only reasons, and the strange one is, one of the reasons why it's coming down on the list is because the look and feel of the film just didn't really feel right. It felt strange. It felt like, and I think people have said this before, it felt like Wes Craven had put Vaseline on all the lenses so that it looked like this kind of foggy look to the film. I know that obviously wasn't what happened. In post-production, that's what they've done. I don't know if Wes Craven asked for that, or if that's just how they edited it. Maybe Wes Craven saw it and thought, what's that on my screen? What is that look to my film? I think without that, it would have felt a little bit better. It would have felt more like the original trilogy that he brought out previously. But the story was good. Ghostface was great. I liked the killers in this film. They weren't the best, but I still liked the killers. Acting was great, and I loved the original trio that came back, Sidney, Gale and Dewey. So everything about the film was really good. It's still a really good Scream movie. For a 4th movie in a franchise, you would expect the quality to dip, but in this case, the quality went up from Scream 3. And at number 5 is Wes Craven's New Nightmare. Similar to The People Under the Stairs, this is one of the movies that I saw at the video store. I wanted to rent it all the time. Unfortunately, I didn't rent it, but I did see it on TV and recorded it on VHS. So it's a film that I did watch a lot of times in the 90s. And similar to the little kid from The People Under the Stairs, Dylan in A New Nightmare, played by Michael Hughes, he was a kid that I could latch onto because I was similar age to him, a little bit older, but I was still that similar age. And it was the first Nightmare on Elm Street movie that I watched with a kid round about my age. And so that kind of made me latch onto it. Not only that, the story itself completely blew my mind as a 10-year-old or an 11-year-old. Whenever I watched this, it blew my mind watching it, thinking these people are playing themselves in real life in a movie, inside a movie. It just completely blew my mind as a kid. I understood it enough to know what was happening, but I just couldn't quite comprehend how smart this was written, how well this movie was directed until I was an adult. When I watched it as an adult, I loved it even more because there are movies in the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise that are not great. And I think with Wes Craven coming back years after making the first one, 10 years in fact, bringing the original cast back and directing it himself, it was a triumphant return, and it was scary. Freddy Krueger looked as scary as he had since the first and second movie. Everything about the first few movies that were great, Wes Craven brought back for this New Nightmare. And at number 4 is Scream 2. Now this is a film that shot right up my list for Wes Craven for Scream. For any types of lists with Scream 2 on it, that goes right up. I might need to stop watching Scream 2 because every time I watch it, I love it even more and it creeps up my lists for whatever lists that it's on. I don't know why it is, but I always thought that I would love Scream 1 way more than Scream 2 because Scream 1 was fantastic, but every time I watch Scream 2, it adds to what was great about Scream 1. I'm not saying it's better than Scream 1, of course, but when I first saw the movie, I think I always compared it to Scream 1, and that made me hate Scream 2. Not hate it, but just not enjoy it, because everything I loved about Scream 1 was missing to me when I watched the film. But after a few Scream movies, after a few years, every time I go back to it, it's got that charm to it. It's got everything that I love about Scream 1 actually is there in Scream 2. I just didn't want to see it the first few times because I was in love with Scream 1 so much. So I was kind of blinded by the love for the first movie that I decided to not like Scream 2, and it was the wrong way to look at it. But obviously, as I'm an adult, I've watched it many times again. When I watch it, I'm like, do you know what? This is a fantastic film. What a sequel to one of the best horror movies of all time. And at number 3 is Red Eye. I think this is the only film on the list that you wouldn't really consider 100% horror, because it has got a bit of horror in it, but it's got a lot of action, some comedy and some romance as well. So it's got a mixture of everything, and Wes Craven is known to be able to do that. So that's really good that he has had the experience leading up to Red Eye. But one thing I hated, not about the film, but it was about the marketing, the trailer, was it gave not everything away, but it gave the pivotal story away in the trailer. I think if they marketed the movie as these two people on an aeroplane and something's went wrong, maybe that would have been enough. But I know that Wes Craven, or maybe even the marketers behind this film, thought if we don't show that Jackson Ripner has got something to do with the kidnapping of Rachel McAdams' father, then maybe people won't want to come and see it. Now, the trailer did make me want to see the movie, but I didn't see any more twists and turns other than the pivotal points that we saw in the trailer. So that was the negative parts. However, this was an adrenaline rushed movie. It felt like a movie that should have Liam Neeson in it. That's how good it was, like a Taken style film. But I thought that Cillian Murphy was outstanding in this movie. Ever since I saw him in this film, I wanted to see him in more movies like this. I wanted to see him in horror films. I wanted to see him in anything to do with Wes Craven, because I think the pairing and even the trio with Wes Craven, Rachel McAdams and Cillian Murphy was absolutely outstanding. This movie was about 90 minutes long, but it only felt like an hour because I was on the edge of my seat for the full 90 minutes. It was an adrenaline rush film from start to the finish. There was no hold up. Even the conversations that the two of them had before the build up of the aeroplane, even on the aeroplane, it was all tension filled because unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, you saw what was happening in the trailer. So when he was meeting her at the airport, we knew he was a bad guy straight away. So when he was talking to her nicely and she was nice back to him, we're like, oh, what's going to happen? So they were having nice conversations, but we were on the edge of our seat going, don't move away from him. So yeah, it was a fantastic film. It was probably Wes Craven's most surprising movie, because it was a film that I thought didn't really look like my cup of tea because it wasn't horror, but when I saw it, I was completely blown away. And at number 2 is A Nightmare on Elm Street, the original from 1984. Now, there's not much I can really add to this film, and I don't actually, in fact, I haven't done a review for this film on my channel before, and I will do a review, so I don't want to really go into too much. All I can say is it's one of the best horror films ever made. I think you already knew that. It was a film that, before I saw it, I would watch horror movies when I was a kid, and I would be petrified going to bed, and I was scared I would have dreams about what I watched. And I did. I had dreams about what I watched. I was very scared. I'd wake up at night, I was sweating, crying, got up the next day and decided I want to watch more horror films. That's what we've done as kids. We never learn from our mistakes, and rightly so, because we all want to see horror films as a kid. But then I heard about this film, A Nightmare on Elm Street. Now, I didn't even know what it was about before I saw the movie. So I started watching it as a kid, and I still remember it to this day, watching it thinking, this is scary, I'm not going to sleep tonight. And then when Freddy comes after them in their dreams, I'm like, oh shit, I can't even go to sleep now. So this is one of the only films I watched as a horror fan, child fan, is I didn't even want to go to sleep after it. I think Wes Craven had a great idea in scaring people not only during the day and at night time, but in their sleep as well. They don't want to go to sleep, all because of this film. Now obviously when you watch it today it's not scary, but as a kid growing up in the 80s and 90s watching this film, it completely blew me away. Not only was it a great film, and it still is a great film and it holds up today, it is still one of the scariest and best horror films of all time. And at number 1 is Scream from 1996. Now this is a film that I talk about on my channel all the time. I've got segments for Scream, the Scream franchise, Ghostface, you name it. This film will always live with me as one of the greatest films, not only one of the greatest horror films, but one of the greatest films of all time, because this movie had an impact on my entire life. It had an impact on the way I lived my life and the way that I chose the route I went down in my adult life when it comes to getting a job and the type of job that I want to do, etc. This all led me to now, and similar to, like I said, similar to The People Under the Stairs or New Nightmare, Scream was a film that I bought on VHS, I rented it on VHS, I bought it in DVD, Blu-ray, 4K. I bought everything to do with Scream when I was growing up because I loved Scream so much. I was at that point in my life that horror movies ruled my life, and then when it came to the late 90s with the slasher phase, all thanks to Scream, I was completely in love with that sub-genre, that slasher phase, urban legend. I Know What You Did Last Summer, I Still Know What You Did Last Summer, Scream 1, Scream 2, Halloween H2O, all those types of films I was completely in love with. And I shit you not guys, I watched Scream and a couple of other films like The Faculty, Scream, etc. every single day for a couple of years. That's how sad I was. And then when Scream 2 came out, I watched that, and then I waited for Scream 3. But Scream was always the one that I went back to because it was just so great. Not only was it a great horror film and it mixed in a lot of the great horror tropes, it brought in the meta like they did, or like Wes Craven did with New Nightmare. He brought like an outside opinion. It was like we were part of the film now. We get to decide what happens. We know the answers because we're horror fans. It was just so expertly written. Obviously thanks to Kevin Williamson as well. But the direction of Wes Craven, the whole cast and crew should be completely thankful that they were part of this film, because this movie set all of them up for the rest of their lives, and it set me up for a great journey to where I am now. So that is my top 10 Wes Craven movies, guys. Now I know that some of you won't agree with that list, but that's absolutely fine. Like I said, it's just my opinion, but leave your list down below. If you don't want to tell me 10 movies, if you've not seen 10, then leave maybe 2 or 3 down below. What's your top 3 at least Wes Craven movies, and do you agree with my list at all? Let me know down below, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye bye.
Why do you want to know my name?
I want to know who I'm looking at.